Welcome to the Irresistible You podcast. This is the place to get a dose of empowerment to create the life you crave and deserve. I'm your host, Amy Beltran, CEO and founder of Irresistible University. Through my signature online coaching program, I teach women just like you how to ditch the body image issues, gain confidence, and lose the emotional weight to look and feel irresistible at any size. If you would like to learn more about my program and see if you're a good fit for enrolling into Irresistible You, please schedule a free confidence clarity call at irresistibleicing.com/call. The link is also in the show notes. Welcome back to this week's podcast episode. If you are new here, welcome to the Irresistible You community. If you are a longtime listener, welcome back. I'm so happy to have you here. So today, what we're going to be talking about is how to lose weight as your future self. This is going to be a good one, guys. So bust out your notes, listen in, because I've got a lot to share with you today. So before we really get into things, I want to define for you the concept of future self. Now, this is something that is really the epitome of my teaching, of the foundation of my coaching program, the methodology that I teach to the students in my program. Because what I teach ultimately is how to become irresistible you. And to become irresistible you is to up-level your life and to live that, like you living your best life, basically, if we were to sum that up. And it's you designing and creating and living this life that you crave for yourself. So if you ever catch yourself saying, well, someday I'll do this and someday I'll have that and someday, we're breaking that concept of someday, and we're actually taking action in the present to build that life that you want for yourself. Because that was kind of where I was in my journey over 10 years ago, is I kept telling myself, well, someday I'll have, I'll own a home. This was like back in the day before I was still in my townhouse, and I was like, someday I'll own a home. Someday I'll have a boat. Someday when I lose the weight. Someday when I have my own business. Someday when I, have more confidence. Someday when I have less anxiety to talk to people. And it was this really convenient way of putting my future on hold because I was uncomfortable with the process of how to get there. Or I didn't know how to get there because I didn't have the strategies and the skills to be able to start building my future in the present. So that was one day I just got so sick of hearing myself. Like, I was actually making myself nauseous saying someday. And I'm like, look, bitch, someday is not going to just happen. It's not one of the 7 days of the week. Okay. It's not going to show up on your calendar. That someday vision that you have for yourself is only going to happen when you start executing on the actions, the multiple actions that it's going to take to build that future that you crave. And so when we talk about the concept of future self, it's really, it's kind of what it sounds like. It's you sometime in the future, but it's not you as you are today. It's you embodying and living the life that you crave. You doing the things that you keep telling yourself, I'll get to that someday. Someday I'll wear the sexy black dress with the heels. Someday I'll have the house of my dreams. Someday I will have more confidence. Someday I will start dating again. Someday I'll ride a horse again. Someday I won't be afraid of the weight limit. Someday I'll have the body that I always wanted. So your future self is not you today as you are with your habits, your limiting beliefs. That is not your future self. When we talk about the concept of future self, it's the irresistible version of you. The girl that's living the life she craves and deserves. So I want you to think of who you would be if you took away all the fear. If you took away all the some days, what would you be doing with yourself? What is the life that you crave? Because every single person has a version of themselves that they crave and they dream about. That is your future self. And so at the end of the episode, I'm going to share more about how to really get clear on how that looks and what that looks like. But just so that we're on the same page, your future self is you living the life you crave. It is you as the irresistible you version of yourself, okay? And so why does this matter? Why does it matter to operate as your future self, and why is it important for weight loss in particular? Let's think about that. Your present self, if you haven't done this work and you haven't defined what you want for yourself and you're living in the someday world, your someday world self just wants instant gratification now because you're afraid of putting in the reps. You're afraid of putting in the work for whatever reason. And so what ends up happening is if you haven't defined what the life is that you want for yourself and the actions that you have to take to get there, because you're operating from this diet mentality of, well, if I just, like, that's the thing too. In order to break the yo-yo diet, body, hate, shame cycle, we have to define what our future self wants. And it's not about what does she eat, how much does she work out, how many macros can she have. It's so much bigger than that, right? And so your present self, if you haven't done the work to think about what you really want, and you're just operating from, I'm going to start this diet, I'm going to follow it really well, I'm going to hustle, it's going to be hard, if it's not hard, it's not going to work, and I'm going to find the next shiny fad diet. What ends up happening, because that's not realistic, and it's not taking into consideration the bigger picture of what you want in your life. So what happens is you have a shitty day. You have a shitty day at work, and all you want to do is like throw your face in the cupcakes, get a hot bath, eat a 6-pack of cupcakes, and binge eat all the things, okay? Because you just crave instant gratification in that moment because you don't want to deal with the discomfort of what you're feeling. Versus if you're operating from your future self, you have an anchor, you have a why, you have a bigger picture for you to anchor yourself to say, you know what, my future self wouldn't do this right now. The future version of myself that has this irresistible life, she wouldn't sit in the bathtub and drown her sorrows in cupcakes. And I know that these actions that I'm taking today, I'm withdrawing from my future self. Like, think of it like the bank. You are making withdrawals every single time you go into those actions. When you make decisions, thinking about your future self, thinking about that life that you crave, you're making deposits. Okay? So this is really important, especially for weight loss, because that instant gratification, and there's something about emotional eating, the fat girl mindset, and entitlement. You feel entitled to that thing that you want in this moment, and nothing's going to stop you from getting it. But that entitlement is stopping you from getting the life that you want. And so that's why it's really important, because you need to be able to make better decisions. And it's not just about what you're eating. It's about the way you talk to yourself. It's the way you feel about yourself. It's all the emotional weight that comes along with it. Right? So it's even a confidence thing, like, not wanting to do something because you don't feel ready to do it. Well, when the hell are you going to feel ready to do it unless you start doing it? So that's why operating from your future self is absolutely critical for your weight loss journey and for your irresistible you journey, period. And you can't become who you want to be in the version of yourself you are today. You have to be able to acquire skills, strategies, and habits to become the future version of yourself. And one of those skills and strategies is what we're talking about, is being able to operate from your future self. That's a skill and a strategy that you have to acquire. Because if you had the skills and the strategies to be your future self today, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. You wouldn't be trapped on the yo-yo diet, body, hate, shame cycle looking for that to improve your life. You'd already have the life that you crave, but you don't. which means you need to acquire a new way of thinking, you need to acquire new skills, you need to acquire new habits, and those habits and those skills do not revolve around looking for the latest fad diet to lose the weight as quickly as possible. If that's what you're looking for, turn the podcast off now because I'm not your girl. And the question comes up because we do a lot of this, I said, inside of my signature coaching program, we have activities and exercises that we refer back to constantly around the concept of future self. And one of the questions that comes up a lot is, but how can I operate as my future self and be in the moment? Because one of we have 5 guiding principles inside of my program. One of the guiding principles is called be in the moment, to live in the moment, to be present and mindful. And so questions have come up before on how do I live in the moment and be present if I'm worrying about my future self. So let's break that misconception down, because here's the thing. What you're doing today is waiting for the wait. And when you are waiting for the wait, that is the epitome of not living in the moment. Because the way that you're doing it now is you think, I'm going to lose the weight, I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to do this really hard fad diet because there's this concept if it doesn't hurt and it's not hard, I'm not going to lose the weight. So you do this ridiculous restrictive fad dieting and you tell yourself, well, when the weight comes off, someday, there it is, someday I'll wear the sexy black dress. Someday I'll get back in a bathing suit. Someday I'll get back on the horse. Someday I'll go play in the floor with my kids because I'll have more energy. And when you're waiting for the wait, that is the opposite of living in the moment. Because when you wait for the wait, you're not thinking about your future. You're just thinking about right now. Because you're just thinking about, well, this really sucks. This is really hard. This diet is really hard and it's restrictive and I'm miserable. But when all the weight comes off, then I'm gonna allow myself to be happy. Then I'm gonna allow myself to do all the things that I dream about. That is not living as your future self. That is not living in the moment. That is you literally waiting for the wait and you allowing the wait to control your quality of life. And also, let's say, and I know for so many of you, you know this because it's happened, you lose some of your weight or you get to your goal weight, and guess what? You still feel unhappy, but you can't put your finger on it. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with you guys where you have told me this, and I was the same way. Like you got to your goal weight or you got very close to your goal and you could not figure out, well, how come this isn't making me happy? How come I don't automatically want to do the things I thought I would want to do because I lost the weight? And you find other ways to pick yourself apart because you never conditioned and trained yourself on the way down the scale how to love yourself at any size. And you believe you're only worthy of love and respect if you look and weigh a certain way. So even if you got to your goal weight, that's not enough for you because now, guess what? You have loose skin and that makes you uncomfortable and that makes you not feel good in your own skin. Guess what? Maybe now you have wrinkles. Maybe now you don't look the way you did at 25. So you pick yourself apart or your boobs are sagging from the weight loss or you've got, like I said, the loose skin or who knows what. The problem with waiting for the weight is that it's never going to be enough. No amount of weight loss is ever going to be enough for you because you'll find something else to complain about. You'll find something else that you're uncomfortable about to hold yourself back from what you're really craving because you're terrified to get there. And I tell the girls in my program all the time, most people they don't have a fear of failure. They have a fear of success. Because with success, with the life you crave, comes more responsibility. This is why people can't maintain their weight. Because they didn't do the work on the way down to learn how to be worthy, to learn how to love themselves. So everything is based on a number on the scale. And when the number stops going down because you got where you wanted to be, well, now what? You're left with the same old bullshit that you started with. You're left with the same baggage of emotional weight because you didn't do the work to become what you actually wanted to become. Because it's not just about the weight. The weight, the physical weight, is one small piece of the puzzle. And that's where you have it wrong, is you think everything revolves around your physical weight. And it doesn't. Your physical weight's a symptom of the other shit that's going on. So when you don't do this work and you don't operate from the place of your future self, the weight loss isn't ever going to feel like it's enough. Because you didn't do the other work. And that's why this is so important, that you learn how to operate as your future self if you want to lose the weight. Because operating as your future self isn't just about losing your physical weight, it's losing the emotional weight as well. And so the other reason it's, we talked about that, but then again, it's also important because you need to make better decisions today for the greater good of what you really want for your life. Because I don't know about you, but binge eating because I have a bad day isn't how I plan on spending the rest of my life and my future. And if that's your go-to today, what are you doing to change that? Because nothing changes until you do. Until you're like, okay, I have to sit in this discomfort, I have to sit in this pain and do the work that's necessary. And the work that's necessary isn't just about watching the scale go down. It's about changing the way you think, changing the way you feel, changing the way you show up for yourself, not waiting for the weight. So that's why it's so important. So we have to start showing up as our future self if we ever think we're going to become her. So what does that mean? Number one, like we just said, it means no longer waiting for the wait to begin. If you want to show up as your future self, you're not going to sit around and wait for the wait for the scale to go down to do the things that you really want to do. You have to start living your life now as if you're already the smaller version of yourself. And the reason for that too is you have to teach yourself and retrain your wiring in your brain that your size doesn't define your worth. And when you wait for the weight, you're telling yourself, well, you're not worthy of wearing those dresses until you're a size 6. You're not worthy of going and doing the hobbies that you used to enjoy until you're a size 6. So what ends up happening? Years go by in your life and you're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I used to do this, I used to do that, I used to do this. And you just don't allow yourself to have happiness. You don't allow yourself to live. You're just a zombie walking through life in survival mode. And that's not a life that anybody craves. So you start showing up for yourself today. Even if you don't like the body you're in, it's okay. If you don't like what you see in the mirror, it's okay. You have to start making decisions about how you want to live your life in the future. If you're a woman who craves adventure, who craves being active, and for the past 5 to 10 years, you've been sitting around on the couch watching Netflix and binging your face off, those two worlds are colliding. They're like competing with one another. And it's this really horrible feeling of seeing that girl in your head and like, oh, I just wish I could be like that. But then living your life in the total opposite way. Sitting around, binge watching, binge eating, on the couch. You don't have to wait for the wait, because clearly it's not working, right? So you have to start embodying, what does the future active version of yourself want to be doing? She wants to get outside every day. Then why aren't you getting outside? What is stopping you? There is literally nothing stopping you but you. Get your ass up and go outside. Even if it's for 5 minutes a day, you are teaching yourself how to become that outdoorsy person again. How to become an adventurous person. Get outside and start walking. One step at a time, literally. So you have to get really clear with, how do you want to live your life? Because most people don't want to live their life on a couch. Most people don't want to live their life stuck at home every single day, isolating. Most people don't want to live their life eating as a way to cope with pain. Okay? So think about how you want to show up for yourself. How do you want to think? How do you want to speak to yourself? Because the way you're speaking to yourself now is not how the future version of yourself, the irresistible version of yourself, would talk to yourself. Just wouldn't. And you have to start shifting the thoughts from, well, when I lose the weight, I'm going to wear that dress. When I lose the weight, I'll start walking. When I lose the weight, no. You start wearing the clothes that fit the body you have today. You don't sit around and wait for 50 pounds to reward yourself like a fucking dog. You're not a dog. You're a human being. You're a woman who deserves a certain type of life. And I don't care if you're 300 pounds, 400 pounds, 150 pounds. I don't care what you weigh. You need to dress the body you have today. Not for a month from now, not for 20 pounds from now, not 100 pounds from now. You aren't going to lose that weight in the next week. You're not going to lose that weight in the next month. So are you going to choose to sit around and feel sorry for yourself and feel uncomfortable and even more miserable because you don't like the clothes that you're wearing on top of the body that you don't love? That is ridiculous. You need to start wearing the clothes today. So instead of, well, when I lose the weight, I'm going to buy the cute dress. Buy the fucking cute dress now. Who gives a shit about the fat rolls? Why do you care? Start taking care of yourself now, because what you're doing is you're teaching yourself, no matter what size I am, no matter what version of this body that I have in my lifetime, I deserve to wear things that make me feel good. That's the difference. Instead of sitting around, waiting for the weight to come off, laying around in your nasty, ripped up sweatpants that you could have replaced like 5 years ago, wearing the oversized bullshit that makes you look even bigger, get rid of that stuff. And let's start taking control. How does my future self want to dress? My future self wants to wear fitted shirts, wants to wear fitted bodycon dresses. Well, guess what? I'm going to start doing that now, because also, you're not going to just build confidence because the weight came off. You're going to build confidence because you're used to wearing those kinds of clothes now. It's just going to feel even sweeter when you get to your goal weight. And it's not going to feel out of the ordinary or out of the norm when you start wearing those clothes because you've already done the work. That's the difference. And so when you operate as your future self now and make those kinds of decisions now, you are literally shifting your energies. You are shifting your energy to a place where you're already embodying that woman today. So that as you become, that's how you become, guys. That's how you become her. You don't become her because you got down the scale a certain number of pounds. You become her because you drop the emotional weight. The emotional weight is all the bullshit thoughts you have about yourself. It's all the times you tell yourself someday. It's all the times that you put your life on hold waiting for the weight. That is all emotional weight, and it's holding you back. You need to live your life now as if you've already lost all your physical weight. Because you're telling yourself, well, when I'm skinny, I'll have this and I'll have that and I'll do this and I'll do that. So let's start doing that now. And then we teach ourselves how to have self-love because we're doing it before we're in the body we like. You don't have to love your body to start doing these things. Doing these things, operating as your future self, is how you actually learn to love yourself. It's how you build a loving relationship with yourself. You don't build a loving relationship with yourself because the scale goes down. You build a loving relationship with yourself when you learn how to think differently, when you learn how to speak differently to yourself, to feel differently, to act differently, to show up differently. That's how you build a loving relationship with yourself. It's not about the number of pounds that you lose. That's not the goal. The goal is the actions that you take every single day. Because the actions that you take might seem small. It might seem like, oh, well, this cupcake won't hurt. Or it might feel like, well, if I turn this cupcake down, that's not really going to make a dent in my weight loss journey. But it does, good or bad. All the little actions, decisions that you make on a daily basis, all of those things go into a jar, okay? And those things add up, and you look back, and that's how you become who you are today. If you want to look around right now at your life, and if you look at where you are in your life, it is a culmination of all the actions and decisions that you have made over the last couple of years. And if you don't like where you are, then it's time to make some changes. Or do you want to look back and go, wow, I can't believe how far I've come. This is amazing. So it's not about the number of pounds that you lose. It's about your actions. It's the way you show up for yourself. It's the way you think about yourself. It's the way you feel about yourself. You have to start living life now as if you already are that woman. Because that's how you get there. There's not some magical level or some magical number that you arrive at and you're like, well, there I am. No, you have to start doing these things today. You have to start taking actions today. If you want to be the type of woman who, lives an adventurous life, then you need to start planning adventurous shit today. Because that's how we're building confidence also. We're doing it now. We're doing it imperfectly so that, when and if you get to your goal weight, it just feels like, okay, cool, I'm here. I've arrived, but I already have the confidence. The weight was just it was like icing on the cake, so to speak. And when you start to live your life now as if you're already her, it creates a shift in energy. You make better decisions. You show up differently. Your posture is different. Your confidence is different. Everything about you is different. And so I'm going to just give you a couple of tips on, how do you do this? How do you start showing up as your future self? Number one, this is something we do inside of my program, and I have the girls refer back to it constantly. Some of them have it in their mirror. Some of them have it on their phone, saved. But you have to write a letter as if you're already her, and this becomes your manifesto, right? And when you think about this letter, you want to think about, how does she think? How does she talk to herself? How does she feel? How does she act? What does she love to do? How does she fill her days? What does she accept? What does she not accept? What kind of boundaries does your future self have? What does her life look like? What kind of lifestyle is she living? What kind of clothes does she wear? What makes, how does your future self think about her body? How does she talk to herself? All these different things, you want to really get you get as specific as possible. We're not doing surface level bullshit here. Because surface level bullshit is what's keeping you stuck on the yo-yo diet, body hate, shame cycle. Just wanting to lose weight to fit into a dress for a graduation or a wedding or whatever, that's some surface level bullshit. That's not life-changing. That's not transforming. That is surface level, and that is why you will continue to gain it back. You will continue to run on the wheel. You will continue to pick your body apart because you're not doing the real work that's required. And I also tell the girls to give themselves a name. Their future self has to have a name. It's like you 2.0. It's like you, it's like the 10x version of who you are today. Mine has a name. Give yours a name because it makes it so much more powerful. And you can refer back to this letter over and over and over again so that when you're feeling a moment of weakness and you want to shove your face in the cupcakes, you bust out this manifesto and you're like, what do I want for my future? My future self doesn't want me to sit and cry in the bathtub with cupcakes. And it's like an anchor, and it grounds you. So I hope this is helpful to you. Let's talk more about this inside of the Facebook group. If you're not a member, you can search for Irresistible You podcast on Facebook. The link is also in the show notes. And let's have some more discussions around, what your future self is, what it means, how to do it, how to think, any type of questions that you have. Let's go over and let's discuss it inside of the group. Because again, if you want to break the yo-yo diet body hate shame cycle, this is a critical skill that you have to have. If you don't have this skill in your tool belt, you're never going to break through. You have to be able to stop waiting for the wait and living life as the version of yourself that you want to become, living life as the irresistible woman that you crave, because you deserve it. And it's time. And if you want to dive even deeper and you're ready to just go ahead and get started, I want you to sign up for a free confidence clarity call with me. We will talk about your goals. We will talk about what's holding you back. And if you and I both agree that you're a good fit for the Irresistible You program, I will invite you to enroll. So the call is free. Go to irresistibleicing.com/call. Pick the date and time that works for your schedule, and I cannot wait to talk with you. Otherwise, I will talk with you inside of the Facebook group. You can also catch me on Instagram at Irresistible Icing. I do a lot more behind the scenes of the podcast, also behind the scenes of my personal life, and we can get to know each other much better over there as well. If this episode is helpful, if the podcast is helpful, I would appreciate your time to leave a rating and review on iTunes. That is the biggest way that you can support me and the podcast, and it helps other women find our community because there's so many of you out there going through the same thing. So that would be amazing if you could do that. I will see you inside the Facebook group. Until the next one, stay irresistible. Bye, guys.